I'm Josh Gross. Welcome to Beverly Hills View. Our guests tonight, Vice Mayor Julian A and resident Isabel Hacker, both of whom have experiences to tell about the National Marrow Donor Program. Welcome, Julian. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. One of you was a donor and one of you was a recipient of a life-saving transplant. And let's, of course, explain to our viewers what we mean by that. We're going to show a clip in a second of a little bit about the Be the Match program and how somebody becomes a marrow donor. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how it actually works. But Julian, let's start with your story. First of all, how did you first get diagnosed? And tell us a little bit about your experience with the program.
I was doing fine. I felt great and woke up one Sunday morning covered in sweat. The bed was soaked. And no reason for that I could think of. Monday morning I thought maybe I'd go see my doctor. And he drew some lab work. He speculated, but didn't really know what was going on. And he called me back about a half hour later. He said, "I think you have to come back to the office." And at that point it was pretty clear. A normal white cell count is up to 10 or 11,000. Mine was 55. And some of the other elements of blood that should have been normal were not. I was fortunate because I didn't have any symptoms. So like platelet counts, platelets which you need to stop bleeding, were actually going down, but had not reached a dangerous level. And if this had gone on for a while longer, they might have. And so in a strange way, I was lucky. A couple hours later, I was in my oncologist's office, Barry Rosenblum, who did a bone marrow biopsy and it confirmed the diagnosis. And a day and a half later, I was in the hospital for my first round of chemo.
The diagnosis was?
Acute myelogenous leukemia, AML.
Okay.
So there are different kinds of white cells. There are leukocytes and there are lymphocytes, and each do different things, and you can have a malignancy of either. The AML tends to be a fairly aggressive disease, and the therapies for it are also pretty aggressive. There's a difference if you get some of these diseases as a child or as an adult, but this was pretty serious.
Okay, let's pause there. We'll get you transplant in a second. Isabel, you're in college.
Yes. And
a professor says to you, sign up for the National Marrow Donor Program. Is that correct? Or
yes, correct. He was a biology teacher, and he had said that the registry was on campus, and he...
Is that UC Riverside?
It's UC Riverside, and he had said, I'd like for you guys to go out there, and I'll give you a check or a check plus if you register today. So sure enough, after the class was over, we went out there, a few friends, and we registered, and back then it was done through blood.
So they prick your finger kind of thing?
Yeah, they were doing a blood drive, and then they asked us if we would register as well.
Of course, now we should say nowadays you can do a cheek swab. It's much less painful.
Easier.
But go ahead. So you sign up, and then you don't hear anything from
And then I did ask the lady taking the blood, I says, well, how does it work? How will I be notified? And she says, oh, don't worry about it. The chances of getting called are like winning the lottery. So I forgot about it. It was 1993. And sure enough, after my second son was born about 2 years later, I got a call from the National Bone Marrow Association telling me...
Now let me stop you. You had a new last name. You had gotten married. You had moved.
And we had moved from college from my parents. My parents had sold their house. So
somehow they tracked you down.
They tracked me down.
So you get a phone call, or tell us exactly what happened.
I remember being in my kitchen, and it was like 9 in the morning, the phone rang, and they said, hi, is this Isabel Berver? And I was hesitant to answer yes, because that's my maiden name. And I said, who is this? And then they said, this is the National Bone Marrow Association. And so then I realized that they were onto something, and I took the call, and they explained to me that they had someone who was very sick and that I possibly could be a perfect match. They would not disclose where he was or if it was a female or a male. And they asked me if I was open to going to UCLA and getting some tests done. And this was around December, November, and I remember I was training for a marathon, so I said, well, the marathon's in March. So they said, no, it's probably going to be like the week after March, the second week. They wanted to actually do something the first week of March. So we went to UCLA, and they said that I was a perfect match. And from there,
What year was this?
I would say it was, I have to think now, 2007. 2006 when they called me, at the very end of 2006, December, and I donated in 2007.
And then what was the timeline until you actually did the donation?
2007, March, the second week of March, I remember, right after the marathon.
So you did the marathon, and then right
next
after,
week,
boom, you went in.
I went in.
Okay. And you didn't know who the donor was because, of
I
course, they
didn't know.
can't disclose that.
No.
But you can meet your donor after a certain amount of years, and we're going to talk about that in a second.
Her recipient.
Her recipient,
My
excuse me, her
recipient,
recipient,
yes.
right. Yes, I'm sorry. But 2 years, so you had no idea, sight unseen. You just know you're doing this procedure for someone you may or may not have a chance to meet. What is that like?
I thought it was amazing that I had no idea who this person was. Again, I didn't know anything about their background, but I was shocked when they said there was another person they were looking at to also donate, and they said that I was a better match just because of, my disposition health-wise was better.
And we should point out, it's not always the same gender, it's not always the same ethnicity,
No.
it's totally unpredictable.
I mean, they wouldn't tell me they would not disclose any of those details to me at the time, but definitely, you're right. I mean, it was just the unknown of giving to somebody and just doing it because you were a match.
Did you have any reluctance to do it, though, because of the fact that it wasn't somebody you knew?
No, I didn't at all. The only concern that I had was that we wanted to have another child, and I did ask, is there any medical data out there that shows that this would be a negative towards someone who's trying to conceive in the future? And they said no, not that they didn't have the research at the time that would say one way or the other. So that was the only thing, and it just we already had 2 healthy kids. We possibly were thinking of having a third. We always wanted a third. So that was the only question that I had going forward with this procedure.
We're going to talk about you meeting your
Yeah,
recipient
sure.
in a moment. But Julian, back to you. So you start your chemo. How do we get to the point where you actually qualify for transplant?
I was not given a lot of choice. The way it goes is your first round of chemo is designed to get you into remission. And in order to do that, these drugs kill all of your blood cells. You get your white count down to 0, which is pretty low. And then it comes back, and they give you 2 or 3 weeks to get better, during part of which you can go home. And then they bring you back again. And the second round of chemo, assuming you go into remission, the second round of chemo is called consolidation. So what they do is they do the same thing all over again. They get your count down to 0, and then you build back up. If you go into remission, you stay in remission, then the next step in this process is actually the stem cell transplant. If you don't go into remission or you don't stay in remission, then you need some rounds of chemo in order to get there. So I was fortunate. I went into remission. I stayed in remission. The consolidation round was good. And so we were set for on a target to get transplanted, but of course then you need a donor.
Right.
What they do with the donors is once you're sort of in the process, they start to screen your blood against whatever's in the database. And the initial screens are fairly high-level screens. I think there are 6 alleles. So the chromosomes have different markers on them. They've identified 6, which are the starting point to begin to make decisions about whether or not somebody else's blood might be compatible. If they find good matches amongst the 6, then they'll take the next step, which is to actually get the person back, get more blood drawn, and compare more. And at that point, they compare 10. And I think most of the centers probably do a couple of extra that they're doing some research on, but there are 10 that are critical to making this decision. And they probably, if you're lucky, there's more than one potential donor, and your oncologist makes a decision about which amongst them he likes the best, which he thinks will be a best match. They tend to prefer younger men as opposed to, well, younger is better than older, and men in this better than women, only because in the course of pregnancy, women tend to develop antibodies, which make the process sometimes a little more complicated. I was fortunate that we found a donor who matched 10 for 10, which doesn't get better than that. And so now the next question is that donor prepared to do this? in the older days, and still some centers today actually take bone marrow, where it's a procedure under anesthesia, and the oncologist cores out pieces of the marrow from which they take stem cells. It's an uncomfortable procedure, and some people don't want to do it for that. In today's environment, more often than not, we do stem cells.
Sure.
And the nice thing about that is it effectively is the same as giving blood. It's the same basic process as...
Well, we should tell our viewers, they basically take it out of one arm and put it back into the other,
Exactly
taking out
right.
what they need, and there's very little downtime for the donor. That's very
Exactly
important.
right. And truthfully, the only thing that the donor has is they take some medication, which is designed to stimulate the amount of stem cells they have in their system. And sometimes people get achy bone pain as the bone marrow, their bone marrow, starts to work and produce more stem cells. But it's much easier than the old process of
So let's jump in there. When you were doing your donation, you did the PBSC, you did the blood type?
Neupogen.
Yeah,
And
okay.
yes, and I had to have Neupogen for about a week
Right.
before.
And it does make you a little achy, or what symptoms?
Very
did you-
achy.
Okay.
I-
like you just
the
feel like you don't want to
symptoms-
get out of bed, or like what is
It almost is very similar to flu cold-like symptoms.
Okay.
But I had extreme pain. I would say after the 4th day of taking it in my thighs and in my stomach area, the abdominal, you just feel very achy.
Okay.
A little bit on the back, anywhere where you're producing stem cells, basically. And
So then you had it done at UCLA?
UCLA.
Okay, so you go in and just take us through the timeline. What do they do?
So I went in for 2 days to UCLA. I was admitted at 6 in the morning. They started drawing at 7 in the morning, 7 to 4. And then
All day long?
All day long.
Okay,
And I just
watch TV or do something?
Yeah, you can watch TV. I did develop a migraine headache the first day.
Okay.
I had never had migraine headaches. And
Okay.
they say to you that might be a possibility of something that might develop. And that was it, really. I mean, I didn't have any other symptoms or problems as a result. But it's 2 days. You go in, they draw blood, as you say, they take from one side, bring it back into the other side, and they take him immediately. So I saw the stem cells leave the room.
And of course, you don't know where it's going. It could be
No,
going
and they told me
across
there was
the world, or-
they told me there was a helicopter waiting for them, like
Yeah,
at
wow.
4. And
Okay.
so I saw that was really interesting how that all happens, because there's like a team
Sure.
effort going on aside from the hospital who actually transports the stem cells, and they have to be a certain temperature. And so I figured they were not going to stay local if there was a helicopter coming to get them. And they would not tell me where. I
Sure.
just knew there was somewhere
Well,
in the
and
United States.
we should point out exactly what you said, that it all has to be coordinated because you don't want them to spoil. So I mean,
Right.
there's a dance of things that have to happen all in order. So at the end of the second day, are you just wiped out? Are you exhausted? What's it
I
like?
was exhausted the second day going in. Not exhausted, just tired. And then I had this headache, of course, that really threw me off because I didn't sleep all night. I've never had a migraine, so I really feel for people who have migraines. I think they're...
And then how many days until you were back to normal, would you say?
Oh, I would say they tell you to take it easy the next day after your last day of drawing. And I would say within 48 hours you feel pretty normal.
Back to normal.
Yeah,
And that was
feel
all you
fine.
heard for a while. Is that
That's
correct?
all I heard for a while.
Okay. Back to you. You had it done at City of Hope. Okay.
did.
So you're on the other end here. You're prepped and ready to go in, waiting for the cells to arrive, or tell us what happens on your end.
So this is a ballet, really, and it starts 10 days before. It's T-minus 10, 9, 8, and each day something happens. Effectively, you have to go through chemo again, and they have to get your blood cells down to 0 again, and at that point, you get the infusion of stem cells. And so they have to arrive.
And do you know when it's coming? I mean, did they
Oh,
say,
yeah.
oh, it's coming today? And
Oh yeah,
okay.
absolutely. We knew the date,
Okay.
and it all backed up from that date. So I was December 28th, and it all backed up from that date. That was a cold winter. It was actually the winter of 2007, and it was a cold winter across much of the midsection of the country. And my wife Michelle was nervous that she said she had visions of this little igloo going around and around and around. But it had to be very, very well timed, and obviously it worked. In our case, we also obviously didn't know where the donor was. It turns out that he was local. As it actually turned out, he was giving the cells at the City of Hope.
Wow.
But we didn't know that for over a year.
Sure.
And
we'll get to in a second how you kind of got some clues once you're corresponding. But basically, so you take the transplant, and then how long until you start to kind of bounce back to normal?
it takes about a week. You wait patiently for a week to see if the blood cells, if you start to produce new white cells. And it's a very interesting thing because you just don't feel good without white cells. You just feel awful. And you can almost tell that something's happening because you begin to feel better, even before they actually go and measure them. And sure enough, at the end of a week or so, the cells start to come back.
And do you start to feel better?
And you feel better.
Yeah.
You actually,
appetite comes back, that kind of thing?
Well, the appetite, not so much. The appetite takes a while because most of the drugs you get during the course of this, even as you're getting the cells back, after you got the cells back, they're toxic. Mm-hmm. They just don't make you feel good. So that took months. That actually took months. But in terms of just feeling weak and tired and that gets better. That part gets better pretty quickly as you start to make white cells. And after you have hopefully a normal number of white cells, then they do things like another bone marrow biopsy. They make sure that they're healthy, and you go through all that kind of stuff.
Now, of course, there's secrecy about the donor at first, but they do let you correspond through the Be the Match company. So basically, they make sure there's no revealing information, but you can send a note to your donor, correct? A thank you note, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And tell us, I know your wife was very involved in that, and then we're going to hear Isabel's story about receiving notes, but go ahead, what is that like?
So my wife was the correspondent, and she was very, very, she was happy to do that. And back and forth, and it was like being in the Army. They would redact anything that would identify you.
Do you get a name or no? No,
nothing at all.
Okay, you just say thank you.
No idea where they are.
Okay,
nothing. In fact, in the course of this, Michelle was knitting hats. Mm-hmm. And every time we'd go out to the City of Hope for a checkup, there's a pot where you can dump the hats and people would come, and for all the people without hair, which included me at the time. And but she decided that she was going to knit a scarf for the donor. And she did, and she connected it to one of the letters and sent it through Be the Match. And he sent her back a note, and he said, thanks for the scarf. It's a great scarf. He said, we live in warm weather. I'm not sure how much I'm going to wear it, but I certainly apprate it. And that started
there's our clue.
The speculation about warm weather. Okay, so we know he's campy, and it started some active speculation.
Now, Isabel, with your recipient, were you exchanging cards or anything like that?
I do remember that the last day that I shipped off my last, pieces of stem cells, I did write a little note to him just saying, like, good luck, and I hope this works, and, I'm thinking of you guys, and whatever I could say to make him know that I was happy to do this and that I was hoping the best for the best result. And sure enough, I think about a year later, I got a call from the National Bone Marrow Association saying that he wanted to meet, and if I was open to that. And I said, of course. And so we got a phone call. That's how we started to talk. We got a phone call one evening, and it was his wife as well, and then he came on the phone, and he said thank you, and he said he was feeling a lot better. And
well, tell us a little bit. Your recipient's actually kind of interesting. He's in the Northwest, right?
Yes. Well, okay. He's in Washington.
Okay, state of Washington.
State of Washington, Seattle.
Okay.
And he, at the time, was working, and I guess he's retired now, is what I understand. He was working for the transportation department in Washington, and he was a senior planner. Mm-hmm. And he's now retired, and he now travels quite a bit because he feels better and is doing quite well.
And so he basically had a full recovery.
He basically had a full recovery. He did explain to me that he was off his meds completely about 4 years ago.
Wow.
And he says that they were really astonished as to how well of a comeback he had made.
And do you have a card there?
I do have a card, and I actually
hold
brought...
Hold it up for us, and they'll get
yes,
a touch
this is the first card that I got from his wife.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And this is a picture of him and his wife.
Let's get
That's
that too.
Paul and his wife, Victoria.
Okay, and Didn't you tell me something about his hair type change?
Oh yeah, he asked me if I had curly hair. It was one of the questions that he asked me, and I said no. And he says the doctors believe, because now he has curly hair, and I says my mom has curly hair.
Wow.
So they said that maybe sometimes that happens. They don't know if it's the result of the chemo or what, but he also rises very early in the morning, which is something that he never had been good at. And
wow.
I mean, I don't think that has anything to do with me, but he
Yeah.
probably is more able to get up now and more energy and whatnot.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is
And
amazing.
you keep in touch to this
We
day?
do keep in touch. They write to me. They know that my birthday's in April, and they always write to me right before my birthday.
Wow.
And they say thank you. And for his 65th birthday, I got a very nice poster from all of his family, his grandkids and all his siblings. They were just saying thank you for his life, because
Wow.
they were able to celebrate this day, and they would not have been able to do that if he had not recovered. So it's really extraordinary to have that back and forth with a person that has had an impact in my life.
That
I
you
think.
never knew before.
That I never knew, but
and you never would have known otherwise. Yeah. Okay, you had a big reveal with yours. The City of Hope has I know you don't like the term, but it's a survivor's picnic.
Right.
Every
They just
year.
did it Wednesday.
They just did it Wednesday. Okay, and so tell us about your survivor's picnic and what happened.
So the City of Hope had asked, Steve Foreman, who was my oncologist out there, had asked if it would be okay. Both the donor and we had agreed that we wanted to meet. And they said, in order to raise awareness each year, they take a pair of donor recipients and they bring them together publicly for the media.
This is in front of everybody at the event. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And behind the curtain, I'm standing on the platform with Dr. Foreman, and my donor comes out from behind with his family. My family was with me, and his family was with him, and that was actually the first time we met, and we met publicly. He kind of looked like me.
Oh, wow.
Or I looked like him. I don't know. He was a little skinnier than he was a lot skinnier than I was.
Okay.
But and as we talked about things, it turns out that they had relatives that had a name Gold that may or may not have been related, and we never did the genealogy piece of it.
Sure.
But
a couple of other interesting things about your donor. First of all, one was that he had just signed up for it not that long prior to your
within the
transplant.
last 6 months.
And it was almost a fluke how he signed up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, his wife came to him one day and said, there's somebody in our community who needs a stem cell transplant.
Not you, obviously, someone out where he lives, yeah. Okay.
Well, and we had no idea we had such a close community at the time. And so he just did it because his wife said, please do it. And it turned out that he was not a match for that. But 6 months later, he and I were like perfect matches.
Wow. And so you meet on the stage, and what's that like?
It's really very difficult to describe. I mean, there's so much you want to say. It is public. It's hard to say it all publicly. We just sort of hugged each other, and I gave his wife a kiss, and my wife gave him a kiss, and a lot of tears.
And your wife has kept in touch with the family?
She does. Yeah. She talks to them. She emails them a couple times a year, sometimes more. Each December 28th, he gets the update on what we're doing, and we get the update. We sort of celebrate that as the birthday. He lived in Westlake at the time, and
so that's within driving distance of your house, certainly.
Well, yeah, unbelievable. We may have met in the course of things. He left the States for a while and then came back. But she emails him twice a year at least.
Wow.
We know what his kids are doing, and he knows what we're doing, and yeah.
Now, Isabel, we've signed up quite a number of people for the donor program, and one thing we find is that some people are just reluctant to sign up. They say one of two things. They say, I don't like needles, or they say, why would I help somebody I don't even know? How do you respond to that?
I'm not sure why you would not want to sign up, and the needle part is really just a small part of it. It's very, very brief. What I will say is, I think that it's just an incredible opportunity to really do something that we can lend ourselves to. Why not? It's such an easy process. The outcomes, I think, are great. I have such an appreciation for life and for health, and the fact that we have something in our bodies that we can give to another person to help them achieve full recovery is, I think, magical.
Well, it's even better than just standard blood donation, because when you do standard blood donation, you obviously never know where your blood going. Here, you have a chance to really get to know the person potentially and
yeah, I mean,
be a part of their life.
It's pretty significant. I mean, I think it's extraordinary. I had no idea that I would be a perfect match, especially because we didn't come from the same backgrounds.
Right.
I thought that was.
So again, you were a different gender, different ethnicity, different age group. I mean, they really
all
weren't
together.
that many
There was no
similarities.
similarities whatsoever, and I think it's obviously if the body can do this, it's an opportunity for anybody to. It's a perfect thing to do. I'm not sure why anyone would not want to do it.
On the recipient end, what do you tell prospective people going through the process, and particularly, of course, the City of Hope is known for doing a number of these surgeries every year. But what do you tell them? What advice do you give them?
For the recipients?
Yeah.
Well, I've been very vocal, and I just walk people through the process. On the recipient side, it's not a pleasant process, and there are all kinds of things that could go wrong, and it's not a straight line. It doesn't start at one place and end at the other. There are ups and downs. There are good days and there are bad days. And so you just have to know that. You have to know that each day is a good day and you're going to get through it and you're going to take whatever it takes to get through it. But there are going to be days where you're probably going to get some news that you don't want to hear, or you're just not going to feel good, or whatever, but you just need to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. When you have no choices, when there are no real decisions except to lie there and do it, then that's what you do. And for me, I had some rules. I just needed some rules. And so every day I had to get out of bed. I wasn't going to be somebody who'd just lay there in bed, even though some days you really don't want to.
Sure.
Every day I was going to walk some. And over time I walked more, but every day I had to get a little bit of exercise. I had to get a shower every day. I had to do that. I tried to get through the email kind of stuff. That was a little harder. People kind of knew how I was feeling, because if I actually wrote in full sentences and answered them,
Sure.
They knew I was better. If it was sort of, thanks for the note,
Yeah.
they know not so good. But I just needed some sense of normalcy.
Sure.
And some sense of moving forward and doing what I had to do.
Your success story.
Well, we tap wood for that.
And today's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You have a donor to thank for that, certainly.
There is nothing you can ever say that repays that. This is life-saving, life-giving. There are not that many people on the planet who have the opportunity to do that.
To do that, yeah.
And it's a special gift, and we say thank you.
Isabel, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Julian Gold, thank you. We want to encourage all our viewers to sign up. You can go to bethematch.org for more information. We'll see you next time on Beverly Hills View.
I joined Be The Match over a slice of pizza. It's a funny story, but I went to donate blood and I was ineligible to donate blood that day. So instead, someone asked me to consider joining the Marrow Registry, and I decided to do that instead.
I was diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome, which is often called pre-leukemia. And for somebody like me who had already had cancer twice, it was imperative that I found a bone marrow donor and had a bone marrow transplant quickly.
I got an email saying that I was one of a few potential matches and I should come in for some preliminary blood work. And then a week later, I got a call saying that I was a perfect match.
My nurse practitioner called me, and I was driving in my car on the back roads of Minnesota when she called and said, not only do you have a match, but we have a perfect 10 out of 10 match. I stopped my car and pulled over into somebody's driveway and just fell apart at the steering wheel. So after a year, you can meet. I remember getting just her name, just in an email.
Yeah.
And just like anybody else, I immediately went to Facebook and typed in Maxine, and there she was.
I wanted to be like, hi, I love you, like, I want to be best friends forever, blah, blah. So instead I was just like, hi, I'm Maxine, and I'm a bone marrow donor. What's up?
You have the opportunity through joining Be the Match to be somebody's perfect match and save their life. This is a unique opportunity in that you could be the only shot somebody has to live.
I was excited that I could help someone and I could save someone else's loved one and save someone's life, so it's the best feeling.